Hello, everybody. I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Helping the Brave. Let's bring in our guest today. It's Anthony A.B. Bourke. No, I messed that up. Burke. I tell you, see, that's what happens when you're when you're a redneck from the Central Valley. Even though I was born in Burlingame and lived in Colorado most of my life,
Okay, Burlingame kid. I was born in Palo Alto, California,
yeah,
and ended up in the Central Valley as well.
Well, my dad worked for Ma Bell, so we went wherever the next advancement was.
Understood.
And that was when they were, before they were split apart and then put back together and then split apart and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
All right, Anthony, what service were you in and why?
I'm Air Force, 5 years active duty and 15 years in the reserve, specifically with the 144th Fighter Wing of the California Air National Guard, based in beautiful Fresno, California, just down the road from where you live. Why? I grew up in a Navy household. My dad had flown A-4 Skyhawks in the Navy, 5 years on active duty and 3 or 4 years in the reserves. And pretty early in my life, I figured out, maybe after watching him fly and then watching the Blue Angels fly, that's what I want to do. And by about the age of 16, I had a fully baked plan. I called it Sky God. I wanted to be a 35-year-old F-16 pilot in the reserves, United Airlines captain based in San Francisco, California, and a bachelor. And I thought that would be the ultimate life. So that's how I started down that path.
And how did that vision work for you?
How'd your plan work out? Like most, it works out great until you get punched in the face. I didn't get punched in the face, but at 27, I was flying F-4 Phantoms on the active duty. I got married to really my college sweetheart. We had our first baby. The airlines wouldn't hire me, not because I was a bad guy, but more because I had about 1,000 hours of flight time, and they were looking for applicants with 3,000 hours of flight time. And I got hired to fly F-16s in the reserves with the California Air National Guard. And that kind of sequence of events was maybe one of the luckiest things that ever happened to me, because you know this, Ed, but when you join a reserve F-16 squadron, you're certainly warmly welcomed, but pretty quickly your squadron commander takes you aside and says something to you like, hey, new guy, time to go find yourself a real job. And unlike all of my squadron mates who were United Airlines pilots or Delta pilots or American Airlines pilots, I ended up choosing to follow my other passion of starting and building at least what I thought were great businesses. And so you may be familiar with this company since you're in this world. I opened a regional branch for a mortgage bank called Weyerhaeuser Mortgage. Mm-hmm. That was in 1992. And that went pretty well. I became their top producing mortgage banker in the Western US. And I really enjoyed it because I was home every night. This, being a mortgage banker in your community, when you're the fighter pilot in the community, everyone seems to want to do business with you. But somehow I got pulled into another startup, California-based startup, not particularly sexy, a family paint manufacturing business that wanted to figure out how to sell their paint to the Home Depot. And they hired me and another fighter pilot to help them do that. And we were quite successful. We ultimately landed 40 feet of space in every Home Depot west of Minneapolis, which was 420 stores and about $70 million of revenue. So that was over the course of about a 3-year period. And that was quite a ride and a heck of a lot of fun. And what we started realizing from this process that was essentially that everything we were doing to grow our businesses, to train our people, to execute, and really to win in the marketplace was almost the exact same thing I was doing in my spare time, if you will, flying F-16s. And so we thought, geez, maybe we should start a management training company based on some of these principles. And based on that, I started a company called Afterburner Seminars. This was a management training company where we dreamed of giving keynote speeches, putting on interactive team building programs, corporate coaching and consulting. And our first client, believe it or not, was Home Depot. And the business grew quite dramatically from there. We grew to a place over 11 years where we had 50 men and women fighter pilots working for us. We were putting on about 300 programs a year in the US. We were licensing our programs to fighter pilots in other countries. So they were wearing their own flight suits, speaking their own language, but delivering our intellectual property. And by the grace of God, I sold that business in 2007, which was just dumb luck timing. I know you were probably in the mortgage industry then. So
I still am.
Yeah, and still are. Yeah, not the greatest time for the meetings and events space either. Had a non-compete for a couple of years, and then in 2009, went on to start my current business, which is called Mach 2.
Again, do you hire only fighter pilots also on this one too, or do you hire everybody?
So in this one, it's a shift. Now it's just me, and I speak 30 to 40 times a year. And I do mostly keynote speeches, 1 hour, sometimes 90 minutes, and then occasionally half day or full day programs, and occasionally when there's really interesting opportunities, some consulting engagements. But look, I love it. I've now been speaking 29 years in front of audiences around the world. It gives me great pleasure. I love helping clients. I love the clients. I like the travel. Gets me out of the house about one night a week, which I think is good for my marriage. And, I hope to keep doing it a few more years.
You've just given me so much to go back through because I'm that type of a podcaster. I actually listen to what you say and I want to go back through it. But Weyerhaeuser, you got, why did you stop Weyerhaeuser and start that other company? Was it just, what year was that?
So yeah, why leave Weyerhaeuser? I was on a tear. I was doing pretty well.
It could be the year. I mean, that's why I'm trying to find out what year was that, because
a lot of people don't realize. It was kind of the time. So I worked at Weyerhaeuser 92 to 94, 95. And I think 94. That was kind of the time when mortgage interest rates had been falling and then they stopped. And the reason maybe I was so successful is I never went in with the attitude that I could just sit at my desk and answer the phone and do refis. I got up every morning and said, I got to make relationships with realtors. I think most of the mortgage bankers have kind of, maybe, I'm not going to say severed the relationships, but maybe soured their relationships with some of their mortgage bankers. And the opportunity for me was to go build those relationships with realtors and help them do purchase business. So that was really my bread and butter. And that's really what put me on the map.
Yeah. No, the reason, because a lot of people don't realize, if you look back over the last 25 years in the mortgage industry, there's only a good 15 years if you're lucky, or 12. I mean, because there's many years that are really, if you look at from 2007 through 2000, probably 9-ish, that was not the greatest time, because there was a lot of people losing homes but there were still people buying them. If you go back further in the 90s, 98 was a good year. 93, 91 was a good year. 92 was a bad year. 93 started out good. Then 94 was bad. And then, I mean, it was just, if you look at those numbers, you're like, wow, people still do have to buy a house to live somewhere, but it's just a unique situation where if you can survive or understand how that is, you could do really well in other industries.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, I loved it. And, some days I think, gosh, all I needed to do was stay in that business and I would have, had a really great life, joined the local country club. I'd still be in Fresno probably. But, young 30-year-old men who want to set the world on fire, go chasing shiny red balls, and, having the opportunity to build this, this business and crack the Home Depot account and see how big retail worked, big box retail worked. That was super exciting. Hiring a really outstanding team, getting them all aligned and flying in formation. That all totally worked for me. So I loved it.
No, I just wanted to understand the process when you went from that and then you started the company to help get the paint company into Home Depot. Was that the starting of your Afterburner company?
No, we ran the paint company was about 93, 94 to somewhere around mid 1996, about a 3-year run. And we were all in on cracking the Home Depot account and growing that business. And we got to a place in the business when we'd grown dramatically. We were firing on all cylinders. And some of us in the company believed that we had too many eggs in one basket, that we were kind of putting everything on Home Depot, and Home Depot, had the power, the ability to put another vendor in. So we talked to the owner and tried to get him thinking about, why don't we diversify just a little bit? We can do the same thing in Lowe's. We can do the same thing in Home Base. There's some other channels we can get involved in. And he, and understandably so, he said, gosh, we bleed orange. We love Home Depot. They love us. I'm going to keep putting my energy there. And that just didn't feel very good to me. I had a wife and 3 kids. And anyway, we had this dream of starting this management training company. And so 2 of us left the paint company to start Afterburner. And Afterburner grew pretty nicely. I will say that a year later, a company called ICI Glidden came along, and they said to Home Depot, hey, Home Depot, I know you've got this great paint company that provides you contractor line of paint, and they're doing all these great things that are really making a difference for you, but we're ICI Glidden. We're one of the biggest paint companies in the world. We know all about how to sell to contractors. Tell you what, we'll give you $100 million towards the marketing co-op, and we'll provide the same thing. And in a very short amount of time, Conco, the company I worked for, was out, and ICI Glidden was in, and that was the end of it. So kind of an interesting run.
So they should have listened to you.
Hindsight's 2020, but diverse, putting all your eggs in one basket is a pretty gutsy move, I think, in almost any business.
Right, but knowing who your perfect client is a thing that you need to know also, so that you can sell to that person. That person could be in many different companies. That was the thing. They sold to one company. And most of these companies now, like Lowe's, doesn't have the same paint as Home Depot. They have different brands. They don't sell the same thing when it comes to that paint. To their paint. And Home Base, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Well, I'm dating myself. We did something kind of unique, and this might be interesting to your listeners as they're thinking about transitioning from the military into civilian life, or just love business case studies. At the time that we brought this line of paint called Conco into the Home Depot, Depot was essentially a do-it-yourself warehouse. They had the market saturated for do-it-yourselfers, mom and pops that on the weekend would come in, buy paint, buy drywall, buy whatever, do home projects. And our pitch to Home Depot was, Depot, you are doing a great job with the do-it-yourselfer, but you're not penetrating the contractor market at all. And I mean, think about it. If the average do-it-yourselfer buys 5 gallons of paint a year, the average contractor buys 50 gallons a week. The average do-it-yourselfer shops on weekends. The average contractor shops on weekdays in the mornings. Tell you what, we are a company that makes contractor brand paint. We'll provide you a contractor line of paint, and we will teach you how to sell to contractors. We'll help you set up a contractor paint center, and our reps, instead of just hanging around in the stores and dusting cans in the aisles, they'll go out into the market. We'll cold call on contractors. We'll tell them about your paint program. We'll bring them into the Home Depot, and we'll teach you how to sell to them. And Depot thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And so we did just that, and that kind of changed Depot's view on the contractor and the whole selling to pros. And you can now go and you can see the contractor desk in any Home Depot store. You see the paint center there set up to sell to contractors. So it was pretty revolutionary for Depot. I think it helped grow their business. It certainly helped grow ours just by looking at their business in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I think people have to realize, because we talked about, I don't know if we really talked about it, but when you get transition out, you need to have a purpose and you need to keep going forward. And a lot of people don't have that. But looking at what you did with, okay, well, how can I look at this differently to help Home Depot get this stuff in there, is how you should look at things these days. And you look at everything. But I also think that comes from a military background.
I think a little bit. I mean, we did the same, or I did the same thing in the mortgage industry. Everybody was doing refis, and I realized things were changing, and I got into the purchase market. But what I find, and Ed, I'm curious, since you interview people all the time, I get people coming up to me all the time saying, AB, I don't get it. How did you do it? I mean, if I weren't flying jets or driving a tank or, shooting a weapon, I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd be flipping burgers or selling shoes. I don't have any other marketable skills. And, this always takes me by surprise and I tell them, you have no idea the skill set that you bring to corporate America. I mean, you are professional. You're a team player. You're honest. People trust you. People like you. People want to support you. There are so many companies that would love to hire you. And all you need to do is get across this gap or this belief system that, on the corporate side, they're speaking a foreign language and you'd never fit in, because you can fit in great. There's many corporations out there that are actively trying to recruit veterans like yourself. So it's just a question of getting up out of bed and making that first phone call or sending that first email or having that first visit. And once you do it a few times, you're going to get across the fence and you're going to realize, hey, I can fit into this world just as well.
And I think it's a little bit more than that. And I'm not trying to knock what you said. Please don't take it that way.
No, I'd love to hear your perspective.
I see that a lot of times people, one of the two things that you didn't talk about is attention to detail alone. What we have with attention to detail, because what we were taught while we're in, is huge. We see things that people don't see. Like the other day this is way off subject, but my truck, I found water inside it in the trough. I'm like, where's that water coming from? And I checked everything out, and I was like, I grabbed a cup of water, dumped it on the windshield, and I saw that it was coming down behind. I had that windshield replaced a year or so ago. So I called the people, and they're like, bring it in, and they replaced the windshield. And they're like, they looked at it, was installed properly. Well, I saw that it was off by that much difference than what it was. It was sitting out just a little out of the trough more than it should have been. I saw that where most people wouldn't have saw that. And that's because of what I know from being in the medical field, being in the military, in the Navy, and what we learned, attention to detail, how to do SOPs, how to create things, how to make sure that if you're not there, somebody else knows how to do it. They don't know how to do that in the civilian world. The other thing they don't know how to do in the civilian world is understand what we bring. There are some companies who do, but most of the companies have no idea. They don't understand the difference. All they think here is, oh, they might have PTSD. Even if they do, that doesn't mean that they're not able to, deal with things and work through that process. Everybody has some level of PTSD to a certain point from things that happen in their life.
Sure.
But I'm just saying that what I think needs to happen is we have people helping vets get into companies, but I think there needs to be more people helping companies understand vets.
Yeah, I've made that suggestion a few times. If you're going to hire vets, vets like to be trained. They want to be told how the job should be done. And obviously the military puts a lot of energy into training people. And that's made us one of the greatest fighting forces in the world. I would say the greatest fighting force in the world. Because there's a much bigger profit incentive in business, training sometimes gets short shrifted. So if you're going to hire vets, I think training matters. And then possibly for every veteran you bring in, having someone mentor them, just someone they can turn to ask questions when things don't make sense, because it can seem like a slightly different world at first.
It's not slightly, it's totally different. I mean, you can't talk the same direct to somebody that you talk in the military. People cry. I have a level, and my company, I had people in between certain people because there's salespeople I can talk normal. Like I say, I want to hire all vets. That means we can talk any way we want. We're not going to, and that's the directness what the industry you were in as a warehouser in the industry I'm still in. You have to talk direct to people. You have to tell them the way it is. There's no sugarcoating where there are with this, that, and this. You have to talk to them, and you have to be able to talk to them. And you run into people who don't want to hear that, and that's okay. So again, it goes back to your perfect client. Just work with your perfect clients and talk to those people, all marketing to those people. You'll bring them in and then repel everybody else. But back to the whole thing about training, a vet will figure it out too. If you have a manual, they'll read it and they'll figure it out. They just need to know what to do, what not to do, so they can just get it done. And I don't think corporate America understands that. Corporate America needs, I just think there's an opening for, because about 200,000 vets come out a year. That's a lot of people to be put into different companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. The only thing I'd push back on a little bit, Ed, is there's a whole lot of different companies out there that are wired in a whole lot of different ways. So, Comcast or Xfinity now, they're hiring tons of vets, and they're incorporating them really, or integrating them really well into the business. And maybe that's because the business is very mission driven, right?
Right.
I mean, just like the military, they go out and do missions every day. Certainly the airlines are hiring veterans every day, not just pilots, ground crew, flight attendants, managers, same thing, that the airlines are flying missions essentially. So it's easy for military folks to get on board with that. And it's easy for those type of companies to have that culture. But I see it in, offshore drilling. They're very mission driven. I see it in mining. I see it in construction projects. Construction companies often do a great job bringing veterans in because same thing, I fly airplanes. They basically fly buildings. They build projects, and once they're done with that mission, they're on to the next one. So I think there's a wide range of companies.
But that's what, 25%, 30% of the market.
Yeah. Well,
but you have regular companies who are not big companies like Comcast, like the airlines, like the oil industry, like the oil industry hires, ex-cons and everything else because of the whole, and that's not like a negative. I'm just saying they hire everybody. But if you're not, I'm talking the general, the regular companies you deal with on a regular basis out in the city or don't have the same luxury to understand how to hire a veteran. And that's what I'm talking about. It's those companies who are not that big, who are not, the big, huge companies that you'd hear out there that sell to the government and everything else. There's a lot of other companies who have no idea how to talk to veterans or how to hire veterans. They think it's a foreign thing, but you're right. There are a lot of companies who do, but if they're not hiring because that industry's down, like, construction or whatever it is, like, oil industry wasn't killing it for a few years there. Where do you go?
I think we all make our own luck, right? So when you get off the active duty, or when you're starting to look for a job, if you're still in the reserves, this is just like in your business, Ed. You do the activities that lead to sales. You figure out where you think you want to work, and then you start doing the activities that will get you in front of those type of companies. And if every day you get up and have your mission objectives, if you will, in mind, today I'm going to make five phone calls to 5 companies or 5 people within one company, or I'm going to have lunch with 3 people this week, or I'm going to join the Chamber of Commerce in town. Whatever it is, figure out what those activities you think will lead to success, and then just do them every day, just like you did in the military, and you will be successful. That's my personal belief.
No, I agree, but I'm taking it. So I'm not going to just agree with you all the time. I'm going to take the other side when we're on our conversation.
Good. It's a good discussion.
But one of the things you run into is when you look at when somebody leaves the military, NCO or officer level, much easier to go get a job. I've been in 5 years. I'm an E4, E5. Not easy to get a job unless you're in a unique situation. Like when I was in physical therapy, I couldn't get out and take a job as a physical therapy assistant, or I'd have to go to school to become a physical therapy, the rest of it. There are certain things that you can do in the military that when you get out, you can't do. And that's right. And vice versa. There needs to be a way to say, okay, this is because Operation Firewalk, you see there, that is an event we put on here in Modesto. We started it last year. It's a motivational event. It's in the evening. And then at the end of the night, we actually walk across Kohl's, like a Tony Robbins event. And the guy that runs the Kohl's part of that for me worked for Tony Robbins for 22 years as his fire chief. So we have like it's an amazing event. Guy there last year had just left the military, was an engineer. He couldn't get a job as an engineer. And so there are those situations where unless you go to one of those major companies like you talked about, who understands a military engineer, that's what that is, that's what we can use. A lot of companies who need engineers don't understand how that translates. And there needs to be something put together of all the jobs in the military and translate them exactly what it means out in the civilian world, and or credits towards whatever you're trying to do. So you can move on in your life, not spend 5 years in the military or 20 years and then not be able to do the job that you've been doing there forever.
Yeah, fair enough. I do think one thing about life is change is inevitable. And, no matter what happens, you may get hired by a civilian company, or you may be in the military, and change can still happen. Your assignment can change, your specialty can change. The company you work for can go bankrupt. So I think we have to be able to adapt. And I think change is happening more rapidly than it ever has before. So we all have to be a little bit nimble and figure out ways to adapt into a rapidly changing world.
No, I mean, you look at my industry that you used to be in, and
Sure.
you look in the last 4 years, and this is going to sound political, but I'm not trying to make it. You have Biden who got in and shut a pipeline down. I was like, oh, we're going to have inflation, and then we saw interest rates go up 5%. Yes, we people in the industry knew interest rates couldn't stay at 2.5%, 3% forever. That's just not how that works.
Yeah,
But
that one
nobody
did
saw it get to 8.5. And I was telling people, when I got in this industry, I was taking people from 13 to 9, and they loved me. And then you back in the 2021, I give somebody a 2.75, and they said, "Is this the best you can do?"
Yeah.
It's all relative. But we had years where rates went up 1.5% to 2%. We still did business because it was still purchases. But when you went from putting people in really low rates, and rates go up to 5% higher, then you take out pretty much everybody who wants to move up, unless it is a death, divorce, or a job transfer. Those are the only people moving on homes. And so there wasn't many homes moving. People weren't doing cash out refinance. People weren't doing any refinance. They weren't doing HELOCs. They weren't doing a lot of stuff. What I'm trying to get at is, there's, like you said, there's things that's going to happen to you that from anything. You could go to work, and the company you work for, they close up, you get fired, whatever that is. The only security you have is in what you do, whether that is a job you create, a company you create, or whatever, just like you have done. The only security is in the company, what you do for yourself. And you have to be careful with that. And things will happen. Change will happen, whether or not you're ready for it. You just have to have things in place to protect yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, you also have to look at when these things happen to you. And to be honest with you, I was pissed for about a year with what happened in my industry, because I built this amazing team. We were growing. I was doing all this stuff. I was in a documentary. I had a book come out. I'm on radio for the last 6 years. Everything was going well. And I was on, and I was pissed. And I was like,
this was 2008.
No, this was just recently. This last 2 years. Yeah.
Okay.
So I had a book come out 2 Februarys ago, Financial Freedom, Building Personal Wealth Through Home Ownership. I was in a documentary at the same time. It was about how people made money in real estate. I was the only mortgage person in it. And it was a big documentary. And then I've been doing local radio on iHeart Power Talk since 2018, talking about real estate finance, and grew that. And people know who I am, and I get half my business from there, and that's always going good. And then the market just tanked because of the interest rates. But what I was going to get at is, I was mad for about a year, and then I realized I was listening to somebody, and this person said, a friend of mine who was my coach for a while, he was on a podcast. He was talking about a friend of his who was in a wheelchair, who couldn't do certain things. And he said, before he gets upset, he thinks about, did this happen to me, or did this happen for me? And once I heard that, I'm like, okay, what does that mean for me? This happened for me, not to me. So what does that mean? That means all the stuff that I've wanted to do for the past 3 years, but couldn't, because it was too easy making so much money in the mortgage industry like you can. I finally started doing that, started putting together all the different things that I wanted to do. And I wrote 3 more books that I have going to be coming out soon. I've created many different things that I'm going forward with. The Operation Firewalk came out of that last year because of that. So it was just, what I'm trying to get at is, things are going to happen to you. You got to figure out, was it for you or against you? Most of the time it's for you.
Yeah. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. But we get to a certain age, we don't want things to change. We don't want to have things destroy what we've just created. And, and it's not something you did stupid. It was not a mistake you made. It was the fact that somebody just didn't like the person before them, and that's what happened. And then it changed everything. And so bottom line is you have no control over things in life. So the sooner you figure that out, the only thing you have control over is how you react to things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think of it just like planning a tactical mission. I mean, we always, we define the mission objective, we talk about logistics, and then we identify the threats. The threats in my mind are things we can control. And we definitely come up with tactics to overcome the threats that we can control. But in the end, we also talk about contingencies, which are all the threats that we can't control. For a fighter pilot, that's changing weather. That's, what if the air refueling tanker doesn't show up? That's what if one of our jets breaks on the ground and we don't get 4 jets airborne, we only get 3 jets airborne. It's just what if. And the stuff that we can't change, or that we can't control, we do our best to plan for, and then we just go with it. Because, if you spend all your time thinking about, how I'm getting screwed by the economy, or, I'm qualified for this, but nobody's hiring in that position, that's just no way to live your life. You got to just embrace the change and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why I like the Operation Firewalk, because it gets you on the other side of fear. You know what I mean? It's easy. Most people, if they've never walked across coals, understand that. And some people who I understand what happens. You just got to take a step and keep going. Yes, but once you walk up to those burning coals to take that first step, it can really mess with you.
I've heard. I've never done it. I'd like to do it.
Well, come on out, May 3rd, 2025.
Okay, I'll put it on my calendar.
I'm serious. Come on out. We're doing it at Richard's Ranch again, what we did last year, which was a barn that was being built by a veteran who unfortunately passed away while he was building in it. And the community came together and finished it for his celebration of life. So it has a lot of meaning. And so that's where we're doing it again at, and it's going to be a great event. This is probably the last time we'll be able to be here, because I have people wanting to get involved, like Ion Networks and everybody else, over the next next year and that kind of stuff. So it's going to get pretty big. And that's what our goal last year was to save 1 veteran's life. And we did more than that. This year, our goal is to save 1 veteran's life and 1 first responders, because I found out I pulled duty as an EMT, besides what I did in the physical therapy area, dealing with burn patients and wound care and all that other stuff I dealt with. And so I have some stuff that I was dealing with from seeing all the stuff that I do as a EMT and all that stuff, because when you're in the military, you're not just an EMT, you're a paramedic, you're so much more than that. And now I understand why first responders are committing suicide at the same rate that veterans are.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Boy, I had not heard that. That's a big number.
Yeah, because we're actually, if you count the real, so when I started my presidency in my Rotary in 23, I was saying 22 a day. I have a 22 challenge that I made into a coin for Rotary, which was probably the first Rotary coin ever made, as a challenge coin, because it's a first, And so by the time I was done, it was more like it was 50 a day that veterans committing suicide, because they don't count certain things. They don't count if you don't leave a note. They don't count certain things, and it's just ridiculous. And so,
Wow.
First responders are doing this. You can go back and just see recently a bunch of police officers just committed suicide. So, yeah, and my goal is just to help you get through that and get to the other side. Community is what we need. We need to be connected to our community again.
I agree.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's helping us this year on this, and he's going to UOP now. He's going to go to get his law degree, and then he wants to be in politics. But he did a whole huge case study on vets and found out what we were missing. And it's basically what we always talk about. It's really connection with us again. It's housing, it's family, it's so many things that just the basic 5 things that we don't get when we get out, unless you have a community around you.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more.
Anthony, it was nice having you on the show today. Anything you want to add before we go?
No, it's been a pleasure. Great to meet you, Ed, and great to meet a Central Valley guy. I now live in Park City, Utah, which it's not the Central Valley, but it's not bad. And I hope our paths will cross again soon.
Well, I'm going to Bryson.
You're going to Bryce?
Bryce, yeah. And then what's the other one? The other one is close to that. Yeah. Because we're staying in Hurricane, and we're going up to 2 different places to go walking.
You're going to have an incredible
Zion is the other place. Zion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Bryce. Zion's also great. You're going to have a great trip.
I don't have to
Go in the
walk.
summer. Go in the spring.
No, we're going this weekend.
Oh, great. It's
It'll
going to
be
be
only like
fantastic.
46 degrees and 60. It'll be
Is
just
that
like
right?
Yeah, it'll be just like the Central Valley.
Well, it's going to be great. Have a
I'd
great
much
trip.
rather have that than heat because I can add on a jacket. I can only take so much off.
Yeah, you get plenty of heat where you live.
Yes, I do. Again, Anthony, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
My pleasure.